The usual buzz of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport echoed through Terminal A as Officer Eliza Morgan adjusted the radio on her uniform. Beside her, Riggs maintained his characteristic alert posture, his amber eyes methodically scanning the crowd of passengers moving like a human tide. It was 2:47 in the afternoon, and until then, it had been just another routine day for the K-9 unit duo. The first sign that something was wrong came when Riggs stopped abruptly, his ears perking up in alert. Eliza knew every nuance of her partner's behavior, and that sudden change in his body language made her heart race. Through years of working together, she had learned to trust the Malinois' instincts as if they were her own. Riggs's attention locked onto a man in his 40s, wearing a Navy business suit, carrying a black backpack over his shoulder. The stranger moved with purpose through the terminal, but something about him had triggered Riggs's interest. Eliza watched as her partner's posture stiffened, his nose working overtime. "Riggs, steady," she commanded softly, but the dog didn't respond. A first in their 5 years together. Instead, he started moving deliberately toward the businessman, his body language shifting from alert to intensely focused. The man noticed them approaching and quickened his pace slightly, adjusting his grip on the backpack. Eliza's training kicked in, and she began cataloging details. Approximately 5'11", well-groomed, expensive watch, no visible signs of nervousness. Except there, a slight twitch in his left hand as he glanced at his boarding pass. "Sir," Eliza called out, her voice carrying the authority of her badge. "Could you please stop for a moment?" The stranger turned, his face a mask of professional annoyance. "Is there a problem, officer? I have a flight to catch." Before Eliza could respond, Riggs let out a low growl, not his usual alert signal, but something deeper, more urgent. The man took a half-step backward, his knuckles whitening around the backpack strap. "It's just a routine check, sir," Eliza said, maintaining her calm demeanor while her mind raced. In 5 years of service, Riggs had never disobeyed a direct command, never shown this level of fixation without cause. But making a scene in a busy airport terminal without probable cause could cost her her badge. The businessman glanced at his watch, then at the security checkpoint ahead. "Look, officer, I understand you're doing your job, but I'm going to miss my flight. I've got nothing in here but my laptop and some business papers." Eliza felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Around them, other travelers were beginning to take notice, some slowing their pace to watch the scene unfold. She could already imagine her supervisor's voice. "Morgan, we can't stop every passenger your dog takes an interest in." But Riggs wasn't backing down. His eyes remained locked on the backpack, his body tense with purpose. Eliza had learned to read her partner like a book, and everything in his posture screamed that this wasn't a false alarm. The man started to step away, his movements deliberately casual. If there's nothing else, Riggs' reaction was immediate and unprecedented. He moved forward, positioning himself directly in the stranger's path, his training warring with his instinct to act. Eliza saw something flicker across the man's face just for a moment, but long enough. Fear. "Sir, I'm going to need you to remain where you are," Eliza said, her hand moving to her radio. Around them, the terminal's usual chaos seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the rising tension between officer, dog, and businessman. The stranger's face hardened, his eyes darting between Eliza, Riggs, and the nearest exit. Eliza recognized that look. It was the same one she'd seen countless times just before a suspect bolted. As if reading her thoughts, Riggs's muscles coiled. Ready? The game of cat and mouse was about to begin, and Eliza had to make a decision. Trust her partner's instincts and risk her career, or let the man walk and risk something far worse. The businessman took another step back, and Riggs's growl deepened. In that moment, Eliza made her choice. Whatever was in that backpack, her partner was willing to risk their perfect record to stop it. Now she had to trust that Riggs, as always, knew something she didn't. "Central, this is Officer Morgan," she spoke into her radio, eyes locked on the increasingly agitated stranger. "I'm going to need backup at Terminal A, main concourse." The man's face changed in an instant, and Eliza knew whatever was in that backpack, it was worth running for. As if confirming her thoughts, he suddenly turned and bolted into the crowd, clutching his bag like his life depended on it. Riggs looked up at her, waiting for the command that would unleash 5 years of training. Eliza nodded, her decision made. "Go get him, boy." And with that, the chase was on. As Eliza sprinted after Riggs through the crowded terminal, her mind flashed back to their first meeting at the Atlanta Police Department K-9 Training Center. It had been a crispy autumn morning, much like today, when Lieutenant Ramirez had introduced her to the young Belgian Malinois, who would become her partner. "He's different, Morgan," Ramirez had said, watching the lean shepherd-type dog sitting at perfect attention. "Most handlers can't keep up with a Malinois. They've got twice the energy of a German shepherd and 3 times the attitude. But something tells me you two are going to be a perfect match." The memory blurred as Eliza ducked around a family with rolling suitcases, keeping her eyes locked on Riggs's tail, weaving through the crowd ahead. The businessman was good. He knew exactly how to use the terminal's chaos to his advantage. But Riggs was better. "Excuse me, police!" Eliza called out, watching as travelers pressed themselves against the walls. Riggs hadn't lost the scent for a second, despite the overwhelming mix of perfumes, food court aromas, and the thousands of people passing through the airport. Another memory surfaced, their first successful track together. It had been a missing child case, and everyone said the trail was too cold. But Riggs had proved them wrong, following a scent through 3 miles of suburban Atlanta to find a terrified 8-year-old hiding in a storm drain. That was the day Eliza learned to trust Riggs's instincts without question. The businessman darted left suddenly, heading toward the emergency stairwell. Eliza's radio crackled to life. "Morgan, what's your 20? We've got units converging on Terminal A. Suspect heading for emergency stairs near Gate A15, she responded between breaths. Male, 40s, navy suit, black backpack. Riggs is in pursuit. The stairwell door slammed open as the suspect crashed through it. Riggs hit the door a second later, his claws clicking rapidly on the concrete steps as he bounded downward. Eliza followed, her boots echoing in the enclosed space. "Stop! Atlanta police!" Her voice reverberated off the walls, but the man kept running, taking the stairs 2 at a time. He was in better shape than most of their runners. Another red flag. 3 years ago, during their advanced certification training, the instructor had taught them about reading a suspect's behavior. Professional criminals move differently, he'd said. They've practiced their escapes. They know exactly what they're going to do before they do it. This guy was professional. Each move was calculated, even in flight. He wasn't just running from a random security check. He'd been prepared for this possibility. 2 flights down, the door to the tarmac level burst open. Eliza's radio exploded with chatter as ground crews reported the unauthorized access. Riggs never hesitated, shooting through the door after their quarry. Eliza emerged into the service corridor to see the businessman sprinting toward the baggage handling area, his leather shoes slipping on the polished floor. "Riggs, hold!" Eliza commanded as they approached the heavy machinery. The dog immediately pulled up, remembering his training around dangerous equipment. The suspect glanced back, surprise flickering across his face at the dog's discipline. That moment of distraction cost him. His foot caught on a luggage conveyor, sending him sprawling. The backpack flew from his grip, skidding across the floor. Riggs's reaction was instant. Instead of pursuing the fallen man, he zeroed in on the bag, his body language shifting from pursuit to alert. Eliza's blood ran cold. In 5 years of narcotics and weapons detection, she'd never seen Riggs react quite like this. Whatever was in the bag was bad, really bad. "Don't move," she ordered, drawing her weapon as the businessman started to push himself up. "Hands where I can see them." He froze, then slowly raised his hands, his eyes fixed not on Eliza's gun, but on the backpack now lying 10 feet away. Riggs stood guard over it, his posture rigid, emanating an intensity that Eliza had seen only once before, during their chemical weapons detection training. The sound of running footsteps echoed down the corridor as backup arrived. Eliza kept her weapon trained on the suspect, but her mind was racing. Riggs had been right from the start, just like he'd been right about the little girl in the storm drain. Just like he'd been right about the hidden weapons cache last year that earned him a commendation. But something about this felt different, bigger. As Officer Diaz cuffed the businessman, Eliza watched Riggs's unwavering focus on the backpack, and a chill ran down her spine. The real question wasn't why the man ran. The real question was what could be in that innocent-looking backpack that had triggered such an intense response in her partner. Looking at Riggs's alert posture, Eliza had a feeling they were about to find out, and she wasn't sure they were ready for the answer. Time seemed to freeze in the baggage handling area as Eliza watched the bomb squad technicians approach the backpack. Riggs hadn't moved from his position, his eyes fixed on the target, even as other K-9 units arrived on scene. The businessman sat handcuffed nearby, his expensive suit now wrinkled and dirty, his face an expressionless mask. "Morgan!" Lieutenant Ramirez's voice cut through the tension. "What the hell happened up there?" Eliza turned to her supervisor, keeping one eye on the scene. "Riggs alerted on the suspect's backpack, sir. When questioned, the subject fled through a secure area, and now we've got half the terminal shut down." Ramirez ran a hand over his face. "This better be good, Morgan. If that bag turns out to be full of gym clothes," a sharp command from the bomb squad leader cut him off. Everyone watched as they positioned their equipment around the backpack. Riggs finally backed away at Eliza's signal, but his body remained tense, ready. Suddenly, the businessman spoke, his voice eerily calm. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." Before anyone could react, he twisted violently in the grip of the officers holding him. In one fluid motion, he broke free and sprinted toward an emergency exit. Riggs moved to pursue, but Eliza held him back. Something wasn't right about this. The suspect slammed through the door into a maintenance tunnel. Two officers took off after him, but Eliza's attention was drawn to something else, a small device that had fallen from his sleeve during the struggle. "Everyone down," she shouted, recognizing it as a remote trigger. The next few seconds were chaos. Officers dove for cover as the device skittered across the floor. Riggs lunged forward, snatching it in his teeth and racing toward a nearby industrial waste bin. He dropped it inside just as a muffled pop echoed through the area. When the smoke cleared, Eliza realized with horror what had happened. The diversion had worked. The backpack was gone, snatched in the confusion by someone else. "Riggs, track!" she commanded, and they were running again, following a new scent through the maze of service corridors. Behind them, she could hear Ramirez shouting orders, mobilizing every available unit. They emerged onto the tarmac between two massive cargo planes. Riggs led them to a service vehicle garage where fresh tire marks indicated a hasty departure. Eliza's radio crackled with reports of a maintenance van breaking through a security checkpoint. He never intended to get that bag through security, she realized aloud. This was a handoff from the start. Riggs barked sharply, picking up a new trail. They raced through the garage toward another set of tunnels, these leading toward the international terminal. Eliza's mind raced. If they were trying to get whatever was in that bag onto an international flight, they burst into the international departures area, Riggs weaving through the startled crowd with precision. Eliza caught glimpses of another figure ahead, carrying the black backpack and wearing maintenance coveralls. "Stop! Police!" she shouted, but her voice was lost in the terminal noise. The second suspect reached the security checkpoint, flashing what looked like employee credentials. But Riggs's reaction told Eliza everything she needed to know. This was their target. As they closed the distance, Eliza caught a glimpse inside the partially open bag. Her heart nearly stopped. Nestled among ordinary travel items, she saw something that changed everything, and suddenly understood why Riggs had been so adamant from the start. This wasn't just about smuggling or drugs. This was something far worse, and they were running out of time to stop it. Riggs's pace quickened, sensing her urgency. Ahead, their new quarry looked back, saw them coming, and made a critical mistake. He ran toward the customs area where armed officers were already responding to the alert. Eliza touched her radio. "All units, suspect heading toward international customs. Be advised, package is priority 1. I repeat, priority 1. Riggs's training had led them here, his instincts cutting through every deception and false lead. Now, as they closed in on their target, Eliza silently thanked whoever had partnered her with this extraordinary dog, because in the next few minutes, she had a feeling. They were going to need every bit of that training to prevent a disaster. The chase was about to end one way or another. The international terminal erupted into chaos as the suspect in maintenance coveralls vaulted over a luggage cart, sending bags crashing to the floor. Eliza watched in horror as he pulled something from his pocket, a small aerosol can that made her blood run cold. "Everyone back," she shouted, her training kicking in. "Clear the area." Riggs tracked the suspect's every move, but maintained his distance, exactly as he'd been trained for chemical threats. Around them, travelers scattered, creating a buffer zone between the fugitive and the growing circle of responding officers. Eliza's radio crackled. "Morgan, TSA confirms the first suspect's credentials were high-level fakes. CIA is involved now. Whatever's in that bag, I know what it is," Eliza cut in, her eyes fixed on the backpack. "And if I'm right, we've got about 10 minutes before this goes from bad to catastrophic." The suspect backed toward the windows overlooking the tarmac, holding the aerosol can out like a shield. "Stay back," he shouted, his accent distinctly Eastern European. "One step closer and I release it." Eliza's mind raced back to their chemical weapons training. Riggs had excelled at detecting trace amounts of deadly substances, but this was different. This was active threat containment, and one wrong move could expose hundreds of people. "Sir, you need to think about what you're doing," Eliza said, keeping her voice steady. "This terminal is already locked down. There's nowhere to go." A thin smile crossed the man's face. "You think this is about escape?" He nodded toward the massive windows. "Look outside. Count the planes. Calculate the wind patterns. One small release here." Eliza felt her stomach drop as she understood. The airport's ventilation system, the atmospheric conditions. They weren't trying to smuggle something out. They were planning to use the airport itself as a delivery system. Riggs edged forward slightly, his training warring with his protective instincts. Eliza could read his body language perfectly. He could take down the suspect before the aerosol deployed, but the timing would have to be perfect. "Officer Morgan," a new voice spoke as a tall woman in a dark suit approached, showing CIA credentials. "We need that bag intact. Whatever you're thinking—" "I trust my partner," Eliza interrupted, never taking her eyes off the suspect. Years of working with Riggs had taught her to read the slightest changes in his posture. He was telling her something now, something crucial. The suspect's eyes darted between the officers, the windows, and the growing crowd of agency personnel arriving on scene. His finger tightened on the aerosol trigger. Time slowed down. Eliza saw Riggs's muscles tense a fraction of a second before the suspect moved. As the man's arm started to rise, she gave the command they'd practiced countless times but hoped never to use. "Riggs, Sentinel Protocol!" What happened next was a blur of precise movement. Riggs launched forward, but instead of going for the suspect, he twisted in midair, catching the aerosol can as it fell from the man's startled grip. In the same motion, he tackled the suspect, driving him away from the backpack. The CIA agent rushed forward with a containment unit, securing the aerosol can as Riggs held it carefully in his trained grip. Other officers swarmed in, securing the suspect in the backpack. Later in the debriefing, Eliza would learn the full scope of what they'd stopped: the sophisticated plot, the potential casualties, the international implications. But in that moment, all she could focus on was Riggs standing proud beside her, his training and instincts having prevented a disaster. "Good boy," she whispered, scratching behind his ears as the CIA began their cleanup. "You knew from the start, didn't you?" Riggs looked up at her with those intelligent eyes, and Eliza was reminded once again why K-9 officers put so much faith in their partners. Sometimes instinct wasn't just about training or experience. Sometimes it was about trust, and that trust had just saved countless lives. The CIA's mobile command center had transformed a corner of the airport security wing into a high-tech operations base. Screens displayed chemical analysis readouts, satellite imagery, and surveillance feeds from across the terminal. Eliza stood before a panel of senior officials, Riggs at her side, as they pieced together the magnitude of what they prevented. The aerosol contained a weaponized nerve agent, an agent named Director Bishop explained, pointing to a molecular diagram. Combined with the dispersal device in the backpack, and the airport's ventilation system, we're looking at potential casualties in the thousands. Eliza felt Riggs shift closer to her leg, sensing her tension. On the main screen, footage showed their first encounter with the businessman, now identified as Anton Kovac, a known operative with ties to international terror cells. What we don't understand, Bishop continued, is how your dog detected it. The container was triple sealed, specifically designed to prevent detection. Eliza looked down at Riggs, remembering every training session, every drill, every moment that had led to this. Riggs wasn't detecting the chemical, she realized. He was reading the suspect's micro-expressions, his body language. We've worked hundreds of cases together. He knows when something's wrong, even if he can't smell it. A commotion outside interrupted them. Through the glass walls, Eliza saw officers rushing toward the holding cells. Her radio crackled to life. "Prisoner escape in progress! Kovac is loose!" "Stay here," Bishop ordered, but Eliza was already moving, Riggs right beside her. They emerged into a corridor filled with smoke, a diversion from what had to be an inside man. Riggs led her through the haze, tracking not just scent, but sound and movement. They found two unconscious guards near a broken security door. "Central, we need medical at security level B," Eliza radioed, checking the guards' pulses. "Suspect is heading for the maintenance tunnels." Riggs's bark echoed through the corridor. He'd found the trail. They raced through the underground network of tunnels, the sound of their pursuit bouncing off of concrete walls. Ahead, they could hear footsteps and the clang of metal doors. They emerged into a vast mechanical room filled with the airport's primary ventilation systems. Eliza's training kicked in. This was the heart of what their suspects had been targeting. If Kovac had a backup plan, "I wondered if it would be you," Kovac's voice echoed through the chamber. He stepped out from behind a massive air handler, holding something in his hand. "You and that remarkable dog." Riggs growled low but held his position. Eliza drew her weapon. "It's over, Kovac. The CIA has your contacts, your network. There's nowhere left to run." "Run!" he laughed. "Officer Morgan, you still don't understand. This was never about escape." He held up a small device. "This was about sending a message. Sometimes the backup plan is just as effective as the original." Eliza saw Riggs's muscles coil, ready to launch. She remembered their years of training together, all the silent communications, the trust they'd built. Without a word, she knew what he was about to do. "Riggs," she whispered, "take him." What happened next was a testament to thousands of hours of training. Riggs launched forward. As Kovac raised the device, Eliza moved left, drawing his attention. The dog feinted right, then cut left, a move they'd perfected in training. Kovac fell for it. Turning to block the attack he expected, instead Riggs went low, catching his wrist with precisely calculated force. The device clattered to the ground as Eliza moved in, securing the suspect. Within moments, the room filled with tactical teams and CIA agents. "How?" Kovac asked as they led him away. "That container was supposed to be undetectable." Eliza knelt beside Riggs, ruffling his fur. "Because there's something you can't hide from a dog like him. Intent. And Riggs has always known the difference between right and wrong." As the CIA secured the scene, Eliza looked at her partner, the dog who trusted his instincts enough to risk everything. In the end, it hadn't been about superior technology or intelligence networks. It had been about the unshakable bond between a handler and her canine, and the truth that sometimes the greatest weapons against evil are loyalty, trust, and the unwavering instinct to protect. 2 weeks after the incident at Hartsfield-Jackson, Eliza Morgan stood at attention in the Atlanta Police Department's main auditorium. Riggs sat perfectly still beside her, his coat gleaming under the lights, the only sign of his excitement being the slight twitch of his tail. The room was packed with fellow officers, government officials, and media representatives, a far cry from their usual quiet morning briefings. For extraordinary service above and beyond the call of duty, Chief Richardson announced, his voice carrying through the hushed auditorium, Officer Eliza Morgan and K-9 Officer Riggs are hereby awarded the Medal of Valor. Their actions on September 15th prevented what could have been one of the most devastating terrorist attacks on American soil since 9/11. As the chief draped the medals over both their necks, Riggs is attached to a special collar. Eliza's mind wandered back to the aftermath of that fateful day. The CIA had uncovered a vast network of operatives, preventing similar attacks planned for airports across the country. The investigation had revealed cells in 12 major cities, each poised to strike. But none of that would have been possible without Riggs's initial alert in Terminal A. Director Bishop, standing in the front row, caught her eye and nodded slightly. The CIA had been surprisingly forthcoming with information after the incident, sharing details about the broader impact of their intervention. The chemical agent they had intercepted had been part of a new class of weapons, specifically designed to bypass traditional detection methods. Riggs's ability to read human behavior had unknowingly exposed a vulnerability in their enemy's perfect plan. The ceremony concluded with thunderous applause, but Eliza's attention was drawn to Riggs, who maintained his disciplined pose despite the excitement around them. In an hour, they'd be back on patrol, walking those same terminal corridors where it all began, because that's what silent heroes do. They keep working, keep protecting, ready for the next time they're needed. Officer Morgan, a small voice caught her attention as they left the auditorium. A young girl, maybe 7 years old, stood clutching her mother's hand. Her eyes were fixed on Riggs with a mixture of awe and admiration. "Can I pet Riggs?" the child asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Eliza looked at her partner, who had already softened his posture, transforming from the alert K-9 officer to the gentle soul she knew him to be. It amazed her how he could switch between these roles so effortlessly, from the fierce protector who had taken down Kovacs to the friendly dog who knew exactly how to approach children. "Of course," she smiled. "Riggs, say hello." As the girl gently stroked his fur, her mother spoke softly. "We were there that day, in the terminal. We didn't know what was happening, but we saw you two running past. My daughter said she wasn't scared because she could tell Riggs was protecting everyone. We later found out how close." Her voice trailed off, emotion catching in her throat. Eliza felt her own eyes welling up. "That's exactly what he does," she managed. "Every single day." The interaction stayed with her as they prepared for their afternoon patrol. In the K-9 unit's locker room, Eliza carefully checked Riggs's equipment, his tactical vest, his specialized collar, the gear they hoped they'd never need to use again. Lieutenant Ramirez stopped by as they were getting ready. "Morgan," he said, leaning against the doorframe, "CIA finally cleared us to know the casualty projections. If that device had gone off..." He paused, his usual gruff demeanor softening. "You and Riggs, you saved a lot of lives that day. More than we'll ever be able to tell the public." Eliza nodded, unable to find the right words. Riggs pressed against her leg, sensing her emotion. That was the thing about their partnership. Words weren't always necessary. Later that afternoon, Eliza and Riggs resumed their patrol of Terminal A. The daily rush of travelers flowed around them. Business people hurrying to meetings, families heading on vacation, airport staff going about their routines. None of them knew the full story of what had almost happened here, and that was exactly how it should be. Riggs walked confidently beside her, his eyes scanning the crowd with the same dedication he'd shown since their first day together. Eliza noticed how other officers nodded respectfully as they passed, how TSA agents smiled at the sight of them. Their story had spread through the law enforcement community, becoming a testament to the bond between Handler and K-9. As they approached the spot where Riggs had first alerted on Kovacs, Eliza paused. Riggs looked up at her, his amber eyes full of understanding. She knelt down, pretending to adjust his tactical vest, while actually just taking a moment with her partner. "You knew, didn't you?" she whispered, scratching behind his ears. "Right from the start, you knew what was at stake." Riggs pressed his head against her hand, his way of saying, "I'll always have your back." In that moment, Eliza thought about all the training, all the long hours, all the times they'd pushed each other to be better. It hadn't just been about developing skills. It had been about building an unshakable trust. A passing family caught her attention, a father pointing out Riggs to his young son, explaining how police dogs help keep everyone safe. Eliza smiled, remembering her own childhood dreams of becoming a K-9 officer. Now here she was, living that dream with the best partner she could have asked for. Standing up, Eliza straightened her uniform and they continued their patrol. To the casual observer, they were just another K-9 unit doing their job. But to those who knew, they were a reminder of something profound. That sometimes the greatest acts of heroism come not from dramatic speeches or grand gestures, but from the silent trust between partners who are willing to risk everything to protect others. As the afternoon sun streamed through the terminal's massive windows, casting long shadows across the busy concourse, Eliza and Riggs walked their familiar route, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Because that's what partners do. They face the unknown together, one step at a time, trusting each other's instincts until the very end. And in the end, that trust makes all the difference. That evening, as the sunset painted the Atlanta skyline in hues of orange and purple, Eliza sat on the porch of her small suburban home, watching Riggs explore the fenced backyard. This was their ritual. After a day of discipline and duty, Riggs got to be just a dog, chasing squirrels and investigating interesting scents without the weight of public safety on his shoulders. Eliza sipped her tea, reflecting on how their lives had changed since that fateful day at the airport. The CIA had been in regular contact, consulting with them on security protocols. The Department of Homeland Security had requested their assistance in training other K-9 units. There had even been talk of a special congressional commendation, but none of that mattered as much as the simple truth before her. They had done their job, and they would continue to do it with the same dedication tomorrow. Riggs trotted over, dropping a well-worn tennis ball at her feet, his eyes bright with anticipation. Eliza laughed, setting down her mug to pick up the slobbery ball. Even after saving the world, you still just want to play fetch, huh? As she tossed the ball across the yard, watching Riggs bound after it with joyful abandon, she thought about what Director Bishop had said during their final debriefing. We've got billions in technology, thousands of agents worldwide, and yet the thing that stopped this attack was a dog who trusted his instincts and an officer who trusted her dog. Riggs returned with the ball, dropping it in her lap and leaning against her leg. Eliza scratched behind his ears, feeling the strong muscles relax under her touch. "You know what makes you special, don't you?" she murmured. "It's not just your training or your nose, it's that you see the world differently. You cut through all the deception and pretense, right to the heart of things." Her phone buzzed with a text from Lieutenant Ramirez. "Kovacs talking. Network bigger than we thought. Need you both at ORS 700 tomorrow." Eliza typed a quick acknowledgement, then returned her attention to Riggs, who had settled at her feet, his eyes half closed in contentment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats to confront. The investigation was expanding, revealing connections to terrorist cells across 3 continents. There would be more briefings, more training, more moments when everything would depend on split-second decisions. But for now, in the gathering dusk of their backyard sanctuary, Eliza was simply grateful for the partnership that had defied all expectations. She reached down to stroke Riggs's head, feeling the familiar warmth of his fur beneath her fingers. "We did good, partner," she whispered. "We did good." Riggs thumped his tail against the wooden porch in agreement, his eyes meeting hers with the same unwavering trust that had guided them through the chaos at the airport. In that silent exchange was everything that made their bond special: mutual respect, absolute faith, and the shared commitment to protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Eliza knew that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. Officer and K-9, partners and friends, guardians standing watch against the shadows that threatened to encroach upon the world they were sworn to defend. And in that certainty, there was peace. 6 months after the incident, Eliza and Riggs stood at the entrance to the Atlanta Police Department's newest facility, the Advanced K-9 Training Center. The modern building gleamed in the morning sunlight, its design incorporating everything they had learned from the airport operation and subsequent investigations. "Officer Morgan," Chief Richardson called, waving them over to where a small crowd had gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. "We'd like you and Riggs to do the honors." As they approached, Eliza noticed the plaque beside the entrance. Recently unveiled and gleaming in the sunlight, the Morgan Riggs K-9 training facility. Trust your instincts, trust your partner. Her throat tightened with emotion as she read the words. Beside her, Riggs sat at perfect attention, somehow sensing the significance of the moment. Director Bishop stepped forward from the gathering of officials. The techniques you two pioneered, the integration of behavioral observation with traditional scent detection, have already been implemented in K units across the country. 3 potential attacks have been thwarted in the last 4 months alone. Eliza nodded, unable to find words adequate for the moment. Instead, she knelt beside Riggs, taking his face gently in her hands. Hear that, partner? You've started a revolution. Riggs licked her cheek once, drawing laughter from the assembled crowd. Later, as they walked through the facility's training rooms, obstacle courses and specialized scent detection chambers, Eliza marveled at how their single encounter had catalyzed so much change. Young handlers watched them with undisguised admiration, eager to learn from the team that had become legendary within law enforcement circles. The most important thing isn't the equipment or even the training, she told a group of recruits gathered around her. It's the relationship. You have to trust each other completely, even when everything else tells you you're wrong. She watched as the handlers worked with their dogs, seeing in their interactions the beginnings of the same bond she shared with Riggs. That evening, as they completed their regular patrol through Terminal A, a route they still maintained despite their new training responsibilities, Eliza paused at the spot where it had all begun. The airport continued its eternal rhythm around them, announcements echoing through the terminal, travelers rushing to gates, families embracing in reunions. But for Eliza, this ordinary stretch of terminal floor would forever be the place where everything changed. Riggs stood beside her, alert as always, yet somehow seeming to understand the significance of this particular spot. His ears perked forward, scanning the crowd with the same dedication he had shown that fateful day. You know, Eliza said softly, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if we'd been assigned to Terminal B that day. A passing TSA agent nodded respectfully to them, a subtle acknowledgement that had become common since the incident. Though the full details remained classified, everyone who worked at Hartsfield-Jackson knew that Eliza Morgan and Riggs had prevented something terrible from happening within these walls. As they continued their patrol, Eliza's radio crackled with routine updates from other security teams. The normalcy of it was comforting, proof that life continued, that people could travel safely, unaware of the threats that had been neutralized before they ever materialized. Officer Morgan, a voice called from behind them. Eliza turned to see a woman in her 30s approaching cautiously, a young boy at her side. I'm sorry to bother you during your patrol, but my son, he's doing a school project on working dogs, and when we saw you two, the boy, perhaps 9 or 10, stared at Riggs with undisguised awe. Is it true he can smell things humans can't? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Eliza smiled, nodding to Riggs, who immediately sat, shifting from alert working mode to his more approachable public demeanor. That's true, you are sure, she said, kneeling to the boy's level. Riggs can detect sensate concentrations as low as parts per trillion. That's like finding a single drop of water in 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools. The boy's eyes widened. Wow, and he's your partner? Like a real police partner? The best partner I could ask for, Eliza confirmed, watching as the boy carefully reached out to pet Riggs under her supervision. We've been through a lot together. As the mother thanked her and led her son away, Eliza caught sight of Director Bishop watching from near a coffee shop. He approached once the family had departed. You two have become quite the celebrities, he observed, falling into step beside them as they continued their patrol. Not by choice, Eliza replied. We're just doing our job. Bishop nodded thoughtfully. The network we uncovered thanks to you, it was more extensive than we initially believed. Cells in 17 countries with plans for synchronized attacks that would have made 9/11 look like a warm-up. Eliza felt a chill run through her despite the terminal's warmth. Riggs pressed closer to her leg, sensing the shift in her emotions. The last of Kovach's associates was apprehended in Cairo yesterday, Bishop continued. Which brings me to why I'm here. The international task force we've assembled, they need experts in behavioral detection. People who understand that sometimes the most important evidence isn't what's visible or even detectable by our instruments. Eliza glanced down at Riggs, who looked up at her with those intelligent amber eyes. You're offering us a job? A temporary assignment, Bishop clarified. 6 months, training elite K-9 units from partner agencies worldwide, teaching them what you two seem to know instinctively, how to read the subtle cues that our technology misses. Eliza considered the offer, watching the flow of humanity through the terminal. For 5 years, this had been their beat, their responsibility. The thought of leaving, even temporarily, created a knot in her stomach. The threat isn't over, Bishop said quietly, reading her hesitation. Kovach's network has been dismantled, but others will take its place. What you and Riggs discovered here, it could be the difference between prevention and catastrophe on a global scale. As if understanding the weight of the conversation, Riggs sat at attention, his eyes moving between Eliza and Bishop. I'll need to discuss it with my partner, Eliza said finally, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Bishop nodded, suppressing his own smile. Of course, I'll need your answer by the end of the week. He handed her a sealed envelope. The details are all in there, for your eyes only, and Riggs's naturally. After he departed, Eliza and Riggs completed their patrol in thoughtful silence. The possibilities stretched before them like the long corridors of the terminal. New challenges, new threats to confront, but also the opportunity to share what they had learned, to help other handlers and their K-9 partners develop the same intuitive bond that had served them so well. That night, as a summer storm rolled across Atlanta, Eliza sat at her kitchen table, the contents of Bishop's envelope spread before her. Riggs lay at her feet, occasionally looking up as she sighed or muttered to herself. The assignment was more complex than Bishop had implied. 6 months minimum, potentially longer, traveling between specialized training facilities in Virginia, Germany, Israel, and Japan. They would be working with elite military and law enforcement K-9 units, developing new protocols based on their experiences at Hartsfield-Jackson. Lightning flashed outside, briefly illuminating the backyard where they had spent countless hours training, playing, and simply being together. The thought of leaving their home, their routine, the comfort of familiar surroundings, it created a heaviness in Eliza's chest. And yet, there was something undeniably compelling about the opportunity. The chance to transform what had been instinct and luck into a systematic approach that could save lives worldwide. What do you think, partner? She asked, looking down at Riggs. Ready for a new adventure? Riggs lifted his head, ears perked forward, as if considering the question seriously. Then he stood, stretched, and padded over to where his travel harness hung by the door, the special tactical vest he wore only for deployment outside their regular patrol area. Eliza laughed, the tension breaking. Is that a yes? Riggs barked once, his tail wagging with unmistakable enthusiasm. You always did have a nose for the right decision, she said, gathering the papers and returning them to the envelope. I guess we're going global. The next morning, she informed Lieutenant Ramirez of their decision. Though clearly disappointed to lose his star team, even temporarily, he understood the importance of the assignment. You two have always been destined for something bigger than airport patrol, he admitted, signing the necessary paperwork. Just promise you'll come back to us when it's done. The department won't be the same without you. As word spread through the precinct, fellow officers stopped by to congratulate them. Officer Diaz, who had been with them during the initial arrest of Kovach, presented Riggs with a special collar tag engraved with the APD shield. So you remember where you come from, he said gruffly, quickly wiping something suspicious from his eye. Their last day of regular patrol arrived with unexpected swiftness. Eliza and Riggs walked through Terminal A with heightened awareness, committing every detail to memory. The particular quality of light streaming through the massive windows, the rhythm of announcements echoing through the concourse, the familiar faces of airport staff who had become friends over the years. As they completed their final circuit, passing the spot where Riggs had first alerted on Kovach, Eliza felt a profound sense of completion. What had begun here, a simple alert, a moment of trust between handler and dog, had expanded into something neither of them could have imagined. We did good here, she told Riggs, kneeling to adjust his vest. And we'll do good wherever we go next. Riggs looked up at her with absolute confidence, as if to say, of course we will. We're partners. And in that moment, standing in the middle of the bustling terminal where their greatest challenge had begun, Eliza knew with certainty that whatever the future held, whatever threats they might face, whatever challenges they might encounter, they would face them together with the same trust and determination that had guided them from the start. Because that was the true power of their partnership. Not just the extraordinary abilities that each possessed individually, but the unshakable bond that made them something greater together than either could be alone. As they walked toward the exit, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun streaming through the terminal windows, Eliza felt a surge of anticipation for the journey ahead. New horizons awaited, new challenges to overcome, new lives to protect. And through it all, she would have Riggs by her side, her partner, her friend, her most trusted ally in the ongoing battle against those who threaten the innocent. "Ready, partner?" she asked, pausing at the threshold. Riggs looked up at her, amber eyes bright with intelligence and devotion, and barked once. Clear, confident, unwavering. Together, they stepped forward into whatever the future might hold. The Virginia training facility sprawled across 50 acres of woodland in open fields, its modern buildings nestled among the trees like a high-tech summer camp. As Eliza and Riggs exited the government SUV that had transported them from the airport, they were greeted by a tall, weathered man with military posture. "Officer Morgan, welcome to Sentinel Base," he said, extending his hand. "Colonel James Hargrove, Facility Director, and this must be the famous Riggs." Riggs sat at perfect attention, assessing the new environment with professional interest. Around them, the facility hummed with activity. Handlers working with dogs of various breeds on obstacle courses, scent detection stations, and tracking exercises. "Impressive operation," Eliza observed as Hargrove led them toward the main building. "The best K-9 training facility in the Western Hemisphere," Hargrove confirmed with pride. "And now, thanks to what you two discovered, we're completely revamping our detection protocols." Inside, they were introduced to their first class. 12 handlers and their K-9 partners, selected from elite units across the military and federal law enforcement. These weren't rookies. Each team had years of experience and numerous successful operations to their credit. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hargrove announced, "I present Officer Eliza Morgan and K-9 Officer Riggs of the Atlanta Police Department. What they're about to teach you might contradict some of your training, but I expect you to listen carefully. Their methods have already prevented multiple attacks that our traditional approaches missed completely." Eliza stepped forward, feeling the weight of expectation from the assembled teams. Riggs moved with her, his presence a reassuring constant in this unfamiliar setting. "The first thing you need to understand," she began, "is that what happened at Hartsfield-Jackson wasn't a fluke or a lucky guess. It was the culmination of years of partnership and trust." Riggs didn't alert on the chemical signature. He alerted on the behavioral patterns that indicated deception and threat. Over the following weeks, Eliza and Riggs worked intensively with each team, demonstrating techniques that went beyond traditional scent detection. They taught the handlers to read their dogs' subtlest reactions, to trust their partner's instincts even when conventional wisdom suggested otherwise. The transformation was remarkable. Teams that had already been considered elite began operating at an entirely new level, detecting threats in training scenarios that would have previously gone unnoticed. "It's not about new technology or better sensors," Eliza explained during one particularly challenging exercise. "It's about recognizing that your K-9 partner is already processing information in ways we're only beginning to understand. Our job isn't to direct that process, it's to interpret it correctly and act on it with confidence." As their time in Virginia drew to a close, Director Bishop arrived to observe their final training session. A complex scenario involving multiple potential threats hidden throughout an abandoned shopping mall. The exercise was designed to be nearly impossible, with decoys and false trails intended to confuse even the most experienced teams. Eliza watched with pride as each handler dog team navigated the challenges, applying the principles they had learned. Where once they might have second-guessed their partner's alerts, now they moved with synchronized precision, trusting the subtle communications that passed between them. "Remarkable," Bishop commented as the last team successfully identified all hidden threats within the time limit. "If I hadn't seen it myself, I wouldn't have believed it possible. That evening, at a small ceremony marking the completion of the Virginia phase, Colonel Hargrove presented Eliza and Riggs with a special commendation. "What you've accomplished here goes beyond training," he said. "You fundamentally changed how these teams understand their partnerships. That's a legacy that will save countless lives in the years to come." As they prepared for the next phase of their journey, the specialized counterterrorism facility in Germany, Eliza reflected on how far they had come from that fateful day in Terminal A. What had begun as a routine patrol had expanded into a mission that was transforming K-9 operations worldwide. Riggs, sensing her contemplative mood, rested his head on her knee as they sat together in their temporary quarters, his eyes conveying the same steady reassurance they always had. "You know what, partner," she said softly, scratching behind his ears. "I think we're just getting started." And as the facility settled into evening quiet around them, Eliza felt a profound sense of purpose. Their work was far from complete, but they were making a difference, not just in the operations they directly touched, but in reshaping how humans and their K-9 partners work together to confront the threats of a dangerous world. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new teams to train, new threats to understand. But for tonight, it was enough to know that they were where they needed to be, doing what they were meant to do, together as they had always been, partners in the truest sense of the word. The German facility, nestled in the Bavarian Alps, operated with characteristic precision. For 3 weeks, Eliza and Riggs worked with European counterterrorism units, building on the foundations they had established in Virginia. The progress was remarkable, with each team developing the intuitive communication that had made Eliza and Riggs so effective. On their final day, as a celebratory dinner was being prepared, Eliza took Riggs for a walk through the facility's perimeter trail. The autumn air was crisp, the surrounding forest ablaze with red and gold foliage. After the intensity of the training program, the quiet moment in nature was a welcome respite. "2 down, 2 to go," she remarked to Riggs as they paused at a viewpoint overlooking the valley. "Israel next week, then Japan. You holding up okay, partner?" Riggs's response was to suddenly stiffen, his ears forward, body language shifting from relaxed to intensely alert in an instant. Eliza immediately went silent, scanning their surroundings. Years of partnership had taught her to trust these sudden changes without question. The forest seemed peaceful, the only sounds being the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze and distant birdsong. But Riggs's focus was unwavering, fixed on a point among the trees to their right. Slowly, Eliza reached for her sidearm, standard issue even on this supposedly secure compound. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. Riggs took 3 deliberate steps forward, then stopped, his posture communicating not just alert, but active threat. This wasn't the behavior of a dog who had spotted wildlife or heard an unusual sound. This was the posture Eliza had seen only a handful of times in their partnership, most notably in Terminal A with Kovacs. Her radio was back in their quarters, a careless oversight she now regretted bitterly. Whatever Riggs had detected, they would have to handle it alone, at least initially. A twig snapped in the underbrush, and Riggs' growl deepened. Eliza moved to position herself behind a large tree, drawing her weapon. "Sherman Federal Police," she called out in English, hoping her voice carried authority despite the language barrier. "Identify yourself." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Then a voice responded in accented English. "Officer Morgan, what an unexpected pleasure." The speaker emerged from the trees, and Eliza felt her blood run cold. Though she had only seen him in photographs during intelligence briefings, she recognized him immediately. Dmitry Volkov, Kovac's handler, and the suspected mastermind behind the airport plot. "You should be honored," Volkov continued, stepping into the clearing. "I don't often take a personal interest in those who interfere with my operations. But you and your remarkable dog, you've become something of an obsession." Riggs's growl intensified, but he maintained his position, awaiting Eliza's command. "The facility is secure," Eliza said, keeping her weapon trained on Volkov. "There are over 30 specialized operators within shouting distance. Whatever you're planning is already in motion," Volkov interrupted smoothly. "While you've been teaching others to detect threats, did you consider that you yourself might become one?" He smiled thinly. Kovac was merely a foot soldier. replaceable. The operation at Hartsfield-Jackson was just one small part of a much larger design. Eliza's mind raced. The facility, the training teams, the intelligence they had been sharing. If Volkov had infiltrated this secure location? "You're wondering about your colleagues," Volkov said, reading her expression. "Rest assured, they're quite occupied at the moment. A security breach on the eastern perimeter. Nothing serious, but sufficient to draw attention away from our little reunion." As if on cue, distant alarms began to sound from the direction of the main compound. Eliza's grip tightened on her weapon, but she knew better than to let Volkov distract her. Men like him always had contingencies, always operated with layers of deception. "What do you want?" she demanded. "To meet the legendary team that unraveled months of planning," Volkov replied, "and to deliver a message. You haven't stopped anything. You've merely delayed the inevitable." Riggs's muscles tensed, ready to launch at Eliza's command. She could read his intention as clearly as if he had spoken. He was calculating the distance, the angle of attack, the precise moment to strike. "More importantly," Volkov continued, "I wanted you to understand that nowhere is beyond our reach. Not this facility, not your training program, not even your home back in Atlanta." The threat hung in the air between them, and Eliza felt a cold fury rising within her. This man had been willing to sacrifice thousands of innocent lives for his cause. Now he stood before her, arrogant in his belief that he could threaten her with impunity. "Riggs," she said quietly, "Sentinel Protocol." What happened next unfolded with the precision of countless training hours. Riggs launched forward, not directly at Volkov, but at something Eliza hadn't even seen. A small device in his hand, half concealed by his sleeve. In the same motion, Eliza moved left, maintaining her aim as Riggs knocked the device to the ground and pinned Volkov with a controlled takedown that drove the air from his lungs. The device, what appeared to be a remote detonator, skittered across the clearing. Eliza secured it while keeping her weapon trained on Volkov, now immobilized by Riggs's precisely applied pressure. "You've made a serious miscalculation," she told him, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "You thought we were just teachers now. You forgot that before anything else, we're law enforcement officers. And you just confessed to terrorism on German soil." The sound of approaching footsteps announced the arrival of the facility's security team, alerted by the commotion. As they secured Volkov, Eliza knelt beside Riggs, checking him for any injuries. "Good boy," she whispered, her hands trembling slightly as the full implications of the encounter sank in. "You saved us again." Later, as German intelligence officers interrogated Volkov, Director Bishop arrived by helicopter, his face grim with concern. "This changes everything," he said, pacing the small conference room where Eliza waited with Riggs. "Volkov's appearance here, the timing, it can't be coincidence. He wanted to send a message. He said we haven't stopped anything," Eliza confirmed, "that we've only delayed their plans." Bishop nodded, his expression troubled. "Intelligence suggests he's right. We've identified cells in 23 countries now, all operating with the same chemical agents you intercepted at Hartsfield-Jackson. They're planning something coordinated, something big." Eliza looked down at Riggs, who sat alert beside her chair, still processing the scents and sounds of their encounter with Volkov. "What happens now?" she asked. "We accelerate the program," Bishop replied without hesitation. "Israel, Japan. We compress the training schedule, get as many teams operational with your methods as possible before whatever they're planning comes to fruition." He paused, studying her face. "Unless you want out. After today, no one would blame you for—" "We're not going anywhere," Eliza interrupted, her hand resting on Riggs's head. "If anything, this confirms that what we're doing matters. Volkov wouldn't have risked exposure unless our work was threatening their operations." Bishop's relief was palpable. "I was hoping you'd say that, because frankly, Morgan, you and Riggs might be the best chance we have of stopping whatever's coming." As the facility returned to heightened security protocols around them, Eliza felt a renewed sense of purpose. Volkov's appearance had been meant to intimidate, to make them question their mission. Instead, it had only strengthened her resolve. "Ready for the next phase, partner?" she asked Riggs, who responded with an attentive bark that needed no translation. Whatever was coming, they would face it together, as they always had, as they always would. The stakes had risen, the threat had become personal, but the fundamental truth remained unchanged. When Eliza Morgan and Riggs worked as one, they were a force that even the most sophisticated terror network couldn't predict or control. And in that partnership lay the best hope for preventing the chaos that Volkov and his associates were determined to unleash upon the world. The training facility in Tokyo Bay stood in stark contrast to its European counterpart, a sleek, modernist structure of glass and steel, rising from a reclaimed island in the harbor. For 2 intensive weeks, Eliza and Riggs had worked with Japanese and Southeast Asian K-9 units, adapting their methodologies to different cultural contexts and operational parameters. Their final evening in Japan coincided with a rare break in the schedule, a few precious hours of downtime before their early morning flight to the United States. Director Bishop had arranged for them to stay at a small traditional inn in the city, a gesture of appreciation for the grueling pace they had maintained since the encounter with Volkov. As they walked through the peaceful garden of the Ryokan, Eliza felt the accumulated tension of the past months beginning to ease. Tomorrow they would return home to Atlanta, their global mission complete. 16 elite K-9 units across 4 continents now operated with enhanced detection capabilities, creating a network that stood ready to identify and neutralize threats that conventional methods might miss. "We did it, partner," she told Riggs, who padded contentedly beside her along the stone path. "Mission accomplished." Her phone vibrated with an incoming message. Expecting final travel details from Bishop, she was surprised to see an alert from the security system at her home in Atlanta, motion detected on her front porch. Opening the app, she watched as the camera footage showed a delivery person leaving a package at her door. Nothing unusual except something about the way the person moved, the careful placement of the package, the deliberate angle away from the camera. Riggs, sensing her sudden tension, pressed against her leg, looking up with concerned eyes. "It's probably nothing," she said, trying to convince herself as much as him. But years of training had honed her instincts for threat assessment, and everything about the delivery felt wrong. She dialed Bishop's number, and he answered on the first ring. "Morgan, you're supposed to be enjoying your evening off. Someone just delivered a package to my house," she said without preamble. "I need a team to check it out before anyone approaches it." Bishop's tone shifted immediately from casual to operational. "Sending a unit now? Anything specific raising your concern?" The delivery person knew exactly where the camera was positioned and avoided showing their face. The package placement was too precise, too deliberate. "Stay where you are," Bishop instructed. "I'll update you as soon as the team reports back." The next 30 minutes stretched interminably as Eliza paced the garden, Riggs never leaving her side. When her phone finally rang, Bishop's voice was grave. "You were right to be concerned. The package contained a sophisticated chemical dispersal device, similar to what we intercepted at Hartsfield-Jackson, but more advanced. It was set to activate when moved." Eliza felt her blood run cold. "Volkov!" "Most likely," Bishop confirmed. "But that's not all. We've detected similar deliveries at the homes of every handler you've trained over the past 4 months. It's coordinated, Morgan. They're targeting the network we built." The implications hit her like a physical blow. 16 handlers and their K-9 partners, spread across the globe, all simultaneously targeted in their homes, places where they should have been safe, where they would have been vulnerable. How many have we secured?" 11 confirmed safe, teams en route to the others. "But Morgan," Bishop paused and she could hear the tension in his voice. "This isn't just about eliminating the teams you trained. The timing, the coordination, intelligence suggests this is the precursor to something bigger. The main attack," Eliza realized. "They're clearing the board of the pieces most likely to detect it." "Exactly. And based on the sophistication of these devices, we believe the primary target is imminent within the next 48 hours. Eliza looked at Riggs, who sat at alert, sensing the gravity of the conversation. "What do you need us to do?" "Get back to Atlanta," Bishop said without hesitation. "Every indication points to Hartsfield-Jackson as the primary target. Volkov wants to complete what Kovacs started, but on a much larger scale." As she ended the call, Eliza felt a grim determination replacing her initial shock. Volkov had made this personal, targeting not just her, but every team she had trained. He had brought the fight to their homes, believing it would demoralize and distract them. Instead, he had only ensured that each handler and their K9 partner would bring a personal stake to the coming confrontation. And Eliza knew from experience that there was nothing more formidable than a K9 team with something to protect. "Change of plans, partner," she told Riggs, who stood ready, sensing her shift to operational mode. "We're going home early." 14 hours later, their military transport touched down at Dobbins Air Reserve Base outside Atlanta. Bishop met them on the tarmac, his face haggard from what had clearly been a sleepless night. "Status update?" Eliza asked as they walked briskly toward the waiting vehicles. "All handler residences secured. 3 injuries, no fatalities. We've established a command center at Hartsfield-Jackson and implemented enhanced security protocols, but without knowing exactly what we're looking for. That's where we come in," Eliza finished, feeling Riggs press against her leg, ready for what lay ahead. If Volkov wants to target the airport again, he'll have to get past us first. The command center occupied what had once been an administrative suite in Terminal A, now transformed into a high-tech operations hub. Screens displayed real-time footage from throughout the massive airport complex, while analysts monitored communications and security systems. Lieutenant Ramirez was waiting for them, his familiar presence a welcome sight after months abroad. "Morgan, Riggs," he greeted them with uncharacteristic warmth. "Never thought I'd say this, but the department hasn't been the same without you two." As Bishop briefed the assembled team on the threat assessment, Eliza studied the airport schematics displayed on the main screen. Hartsfield-Jackson was a city unto itself. Over 200,000 passengers daily, 7 concourses, 5 runways, countless access points, and security vulnerabilities. "If I were planning this attack," she said, thinking aloud, "I wouldn't try to repeat Kovach's approach. They know we're looking for chemical agents now. They'll have adapted." Bishop nodded grimly. "Intelligence suggests they've developed a new delivery method, something that could bypass our enhanced screening protocols. Then we need to think like Volkov," Eliza continued, pacing before the displays. "He's meticulous, patient, willing to sacrifice operatives to achieve his objectives. But he's also arrogant. He believes he's smarter than those hunting him." She turned to face the team. "He won't just want to succeed where Kovach failed. He'll want to prove that he can do it even with us actively looking for him. This isn't just terrorism, it's personal vindication." Riggs, who had been quietly observing the room, suddenly perked up, his attention drawn to one of the security feeds. Eliza followed his gaze to a screen showing the airport's main mechanical plant, the central hub controlling ventilation, water, and electrical systems for the entire complex. "The mechanical plant," she said, the pieces falling into place. "It's the perfect target. Centralized access to all terminal systems, minimal personnel, maximum impact." Bishop immediately redirected resources, dispatching teams to secure the facility. But Eliza's instincts, honed by years of partnership with Riggs, told her they were still missing something. "It's too obvious," she murmured, studying the schematics again. "Volkov knows we'd protect critical infrastructure. He'd anticipate that response." She turned to Ramirez. "The airport's backup systems, where are they housed?" "A secondary mechanical plant on the east side," he replied. "Activated only if the main systems fail." And suddenly, with crystal clarity, Eliza understood Volkov's strategy. "That's it. He's not targeting the main plant. He wants us to focus our resources there while his team accesses the backup facility. If they introduce the agent into the secondary systems and then trigger a failure in the primary plant, the backup systems would automatically activate," Bishop finished, comprehension dawning, "dispersing the agent throughout the entire airport complex." Within minutes, a tactical plan was formulated. While the main security force maintained its presence at the primary mechanical plant, preventing Volkov from realizing they had deduced his strategy, Eliza, Riggs, and a small specialized team would quietly secure the secondary facility. As they prepared to deploy, Bishop pulled Eliza aside. "We've intercepted communications suggesting Volkov himself is on site, coordinating the operation. If you encounter him, we'll handle it," Eliza assured him, checking her tactical gear as Riggs sat patiently beside her, already outfitted in his specialized K9 vest. He made this personal. We're just responding in kind. The secondary mechanical plant was housed in an unassuming building at the eastern edge of the airport complex, accessible only by service roads and secured with standard keycard access. As Eliza's team approached under cover of the early evening darkness, everything appeared normal. Too normal given the stakes involved. No visible security breaches, reported Officer Chen, the tactical team leader. But something feels off. Eliza nodded, watching as Riggs methodically scanned the perimeter, his behavior confirming her suspicions. They're already inside. Riggs is picking up on something, recent activity, multiple persons. Using thermal imaging, they confirmed the presence of 4 individuals inside the facility, stationed strategically throughout the building, their positions suggesting they were guarding something in the central control room. We need to move fast but carefully, Eliza instructed the team. Whatever device they planted, it's likely on a timer or remote trigger. Our priority is securing it intact. The entry was executed with precision, simultaneous breach at 2 access points, creating confusion among Volkov's team. 2 operatives were neutralized immediately, but the others retreated deeper into the facility, using the maze of equipment and control panels for cover. Eliza and Riggs advanced toward the central control room, moving with the synchronized awareness that came from years of partnership. They could hear the tactical team engaging the 3rd operative somewhere to their left, but their focus remained on the control center ahead and whoever waited inside. As they approached the final corridor, Riggs suddenly stopped, his posture communicating danger ahead. Eliza signaled for the supporting officers to hold position, then advanced cautiously, weapon ready. The control room door stood ajar, light spilling into the dimly lit corridor. From within came the sound of rapid typing, someone working with urgent purpose at the control systems. "Federal agents," Eliza called out. "Step away from the controls and show your hands." The typing stopped, replaced by a chilling laugh she recognized immediately from their encounter in Germany. "Officer Morgan," Volkov's voice responded. "Right on schedule. I was beginning to think you wouldn't solve the puzzle in time." "It's over, Volkov," she replied, edging closer to the doorway, with Riggs at her side. "The building is surrounded. Your operatives are contained. Whatever you're planning stops now." "Does it?" he asked, his tone almost conversational. "Are you certain you found all the pieces in play? Perhaps while you've been focused here, my primary team has already accessed their target." Eliza felt a moment of doubt but quickly suppressed it. This was Volkov's specialty, creating uncertainty, dividing attention. But she and Riggs had trained for this, had prepared specifically to counter his psychological tactics. "Riggs, clear," she commanded softly. The Malinois moved forward with practiced efficiency, entering the control room in a controlled sweep that allowed him to assess threats while presenting a minimal target. His behavior, alert but not alarmed, told Eliza everything she needed to know. She followed, weapon trained on Volkov, who stood beside the main control panel with his hands raised in mock surrender. On the console beside him sat a sophisticated device, clearly the chemical dispersal mechanism they had been searching for. "You're too late," Volkov said, nodding toward the device. "The sequence is already initiated. In approximately 3 minutes, this facility will assume control of all ventilation systems, and my little creation will be distributed throughout every terminal, every concourse, every secure area of your precious airport." Eliza maintained her aim on Volkov while assessing the device. It was more advanced than what Kovacs had carried, smaller, more elegant in its design, but undoubtedly deadlier in its potential impact. "Disarm it," she ordered. Volkov smiled thinly. "I'm afraid that's not possible. The system is designed to destroy itself if tampered with. Even if you shoot me, the result will be the same." He glanced at his watch. 2 minutes, 40 seconds remaining. Eliza felt the weight of thousands of lives pressing down on her. Throughout the airport, travelers went about their business, unaware that their safety hinged on what happened in this room during the next 160 seconds. "Get secured," she commanded, and the Malinois moved with practiced precision to position himself behind Volkov, effectively cutting off any escape route. Eliza holstered her weapon and approached the device, studying its construction. The digital display showed a countdown. 231, 230, 229. You won't be able to disarm it, Volkov said, watching her with clinical interest. It requires a 6-digit code, changed hourly. Even my operatives don't know the current sequence. Eliza ignored him, focusing instead on the device itself. During their training in Israel, they had worked with counterterrorism experts who specialized in chemical delivery systems. She recognized elements of the design: the pressurized chamber, the interface with the control systems, the backup power supply. Officer Chen, she called over her radio, I need the EOD specialist in the control room now. En route, 60 seconds, came the terse reply. Too long. The countdown showed 2:05 and descending. Volkov watched her with growing amusement. You know what fascinates me about you, Officer Morgan? Your misplaced confidence. You truly believe you can prevent this, don't you? Even now, with failure imminent, Eliza continued her examination of the device, tuning out Volkov's psychological warfare. There had to be a way to isolate it from the control systems without triggering its fail-safe mechanisms. 145, 144, 143. Riggs whined softly, drawing her attention. His focus wasn't on Volkov or the device, but on something beneath the control panel, a secondary connection she hadn't noticed, a cable running from the device to an auxiliary input port. The redundancy system, she realized aloud. The device wasn't just connected to the main controls, it had a backup pathway to ensure delivery even if the primary connection was severed. 1 to 30, 1 to 29, 1 to 28. Even if you identify all the connections, you can't disable them simultaneously, Volkov said, his confidence unwavering. The moment one pathway is cut, the others accelerate the distribution process. Eliza's mind raced, evaluating options against the relentlessly descending timer. Direct disarmament was impossible without the code. Disconnecting the device would trigger immediate dispersal. Destroying it would release its contents into the immediate area. 115, 1 to 14, 1 nerds. And then with sudden clarity, she saw the solution. Not in the device itself, but in the systems around it. Chen, hold your position, she ordered into her radio, and cut power to section E7 on my mark. No, that won't work, Volkov interjected, a hint of uncertainty creeping into his voice for the first time. The device has an independent power source. I'm not trying to power down the device, Eliza replied, moving to the environmental controls for the mechanical plant. I'm isolating this room from the rest of the facility. Understanding dawned on Volkov's face, replaced quickly by cold fury. You'll die too. The concentration in a sealed room would be lethal within seconds. 025, 054, 023. Riggs, exit, Eliza commanded, pointing toward the door. For a heartbeat, the Malinois hesitated, torn between training and loyalty. Go, she ordered more firmly, and reluctantly he backed toward the doorway, never taking his eyes off of Volkov. You're sacrificing yourself, Volkov observed, his clinical detachment returning. How disappointingly predictable. Eliza worked quickly at the environmental controls, overriding safety protocols to initiate a complete sealing of the control room. Blast doors designed to contain fire or mechanical failures began to lower at the room's entry points. Mara warni 0 and right, 0 norni H. Not quite, she replied, finishing the sequence and stepping back. Chen, now! The lights flickered as power to the section was cut. In the same moment, Eliza dropped to the floor and rolled beneath the descending blast door, clearing it with inches to spare as it sealed shut behind her. From the other side came Volkov's outraged shout, cut off as the room hermetically sealed, containing both him and the device within an impenetrable chamber. 030, 020, 020. Evacuation protocol for the East Wing, Eliza ordered into her radio, gathering Riggs and the tactical team as they retreated from the now sealed section. And get a hazmat team here immediately. When that device activates, I want confirmation that the containment holds. As they reached the safety of the exterior, the countdown in Eliza's mind reached 0. Inside the sealed control room, Volkov would be facing the consequences of his own creation, a fate she took no pleasure in, despite everything he had done and planned to do. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Hazmat teams confirmed that the containment had held. Not a trace of the chemical agent had escaped the sealed room. When they finally breached the chamber, wearing full protective gear, they found Volkov dead and the device spent, its deadly payload having had nowhere to go but the confined space where its creator had been trapped. In the command center, Bishop debriefed the team as reports came in from around the world. Volkov's network was unraveling rapidly, its leadership structure compromised by encrypted files found on his person. We've confirmed that this was meant to be the first of 7 synchronized attacks, Bishop informed them, his exhaustion evident but overshadowed by relief. Major transportation hubs across 3 continents, all targeted within a 24-hour window. Thanks to what happened here, we've been able to prevent all of them. Eliza sat quietly, Riggs at her feet, as the magnitude of what they had prevented sank in. The death toll from such an attack would have been catastrophic. Tens of thousands at a minimum, with economic and psychological impacts that would have lasted for generations. You took an enormous risk, Ramirez said, sitting beside her as the debriefing concluded. That blast door could have closed a half-second earlier. Eliza smiled faintly, reaching down to stroke Riggs's head. Calculated risk. We've had plenty of practice with those, haven't we, partner? Riggs looked up at her with those intelligent amber eyes, and she could swear he nodded in agreement. 1 year later, Eliza stood at the dedication ceremony for the new Global K-9 Detection Center, built on the grounds of the former Atlanta Police K-9 training facility. The modern complex would serve as the headquarters for an international program, combining the methodologies she and Riggs had pioneered with cutting-edge technology and research. Around her gathered representatives from law enforcement and military units worldwide, many of them handlers she had trained during their global mission. Their K-9 partners sat at attention, a living testament to the bond between human and dog that had proven more effective than any technology in detecting and preventing threats. This center represents a new approach to global security, Director Bishop announced from the podium, one that recognizes that our most sophisticated defense systems are not built in laboratories, but formed through partnership, trust, and the unique connection between handlers and their K-9 officers. As he spoke, Eliza felt Riggs press against her leg, his way of communicating that he was still on duty, still alert, still ready for whatever might come. Though officially retired from active patrol, they had accepted positions as the center's lead instructors, passing on their experience to the next generation of K-9 teams. The Volkov network has been dismantled, Bishop continued, its leadership imprisoned or neutralized, its resources seized. But the threat landscape continues to evolve, and so must our response. What Officer Morgan and Riggs demonstrated, what each of you has built upon in your own operations, is that the most effective counter to emerging threats is not technology alone, but technology guided by the intuitive understanding that comes from true partnership. After the ceremony, as handlers and officials mingled on the center's grounds, Lieutenant Ramirez, now Captain Ramirez, approached with a familiar twinkle in his eye. Remember when I told you that Riggs had twice the energy of a German Shepherd and 3 times the attitude? He asked, watching as the Malinois greeted other K-9s with professional courtesy. I had no idea what I was starting that day. Eliza laughed, the sound coming more easily now than in the months immediately following the confrontation with Volkov. You matched us perfectly. I don't think either of us would have become what we are with different partners. Ramirez nodded thoughtfully. That's the thing about great partnerships. They don't just accomplish the mission, they transform the partners themselves. As the sun began to set over the new facility, casting long shadows across the training grounds, Eliza and Riggs walked a quiet perimeter check, a habit neither had been able to break, despite their change in duties. The familiar rhythm of their steps, synchronized through thousands of patrols, brought a sense of rightness, of continuity in a world that had changed dramatically around them. You know what, partner? Eliza said softly as they paused to watch the gathering dusk. I think we've made a difference, a real one. Riggs looked up at her, his amber eyes reflecting the fading light, and she saw in them the same unwavering trust that had guided them from their first day together through the darkest moments of their journey. It was a trust that had saved countless lives, transformed security protocols worldwide, and forged a legacy that would continue long after their own service ended. As they turned back toward the center, where lights were beginning to illuminate the pathways between buildings, Eliza felt a profound sense of peace. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them as they had faced everything else. Together, step by step, trusting each other's instincts until the very end. And in that trust lay the greatest security of all. 3 years after the dedication of the Global K-9 Detection Center, Eliza found herself walking through Terminal A of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, Riggs at her side. Though they now spent most of their time at the center, training new handler teams and developing enhanced detection protocols, they still made a point of visiting the airport regularly, partly as a training exercise, partly as a reminder of where their journey had begun. The terminal had changed little over the years, still bustling with travelers rushing to destinations worldwide. Few of them knew the full story of what had almost happened here, or how close they had come to catastrophe. That was as it should be, Eliza thought. The best security was the kind people never had to think about. "Officer Morgan," the voice came from behind her, familiar yet unexpected in this context. Eliza turned to see a woman in her 30s, holding the hand of a girl who appeared to be about 10 years old. "I'm not sure if you remember me," the woman continued, "but we met here after what happened. My daughter wanted to pet Riggs." Recognition dawned immediately. "Of course I remember," Eliza replied warmly. "You were here that day." The woman nodded, emotion briefly crossing her face. "We were, and we followed your story since then. The training program, the center, everything you've accomplished." The girl, no longer the shy child Eliza remembered, stepped forward with newfound confidence. "I'm training to work with service dogs now," she announced proudly, "because of Riggs, because of what you both did." Eliza felt a swell of emotion as Riggs, recognizing friendly intent, moved forward to greet the girl with gentle dignity. This was the true legacy of their partnership. Not just the lives saved directly, but the ripples of influence spreading outward, inspiring others to forge their own bonds of trust and service. "He remembers you," Eliza said, watching as Riggs allowed the girl to stroke his head. "Dogs never forget the people who've been kind to them." "We're moving to Atlanta permanently," the woman explained. "My husband's job transferred him here. When Emily heard the news, the first thing she asked was whether we might see you and Riggs again." "Well, you'll have plenty of opportunities," Eliza replied. "We're at the center most days, and visitors are always welcome, especially aspiring handlers." As they exchanged contact information, Eliza reflected on the strange symmetry of life, how moments of crisis could forge connections that endured long after the danger had passed. This family, who had once been potential victims in a terrorist plot, had instead become part of the ongoing story of healing and purpose that had emerged from that day. Later, as they completed their circuit of the terminal and headed back toward the parking area, Eliza felt Riggs suddenly tense beside her. His posture shifted subtly, eyes focusing on something ahead with the intensity she had come to recognize over their years together. Following his gaze, she spotted a man in his 30s, moving with purpose through the crowd, a backpack slung over one shoulder. There was nothing overtly suspicious about him, nothing that would trigger conventional security protocols. But Riggs's reaction was unmistakable. "Steady?" Eliza murmured, automatically shifting into operational mode despite their unofficial status. She reached for her phone, ready to alert airport security, when Riggs did something unexpected. Instead of maintaining his alert posture, he relaxed slightly, his tail giving a single wag of recognition. Confused, Eliza watched as the man approached, his face breaking into a smile as he spotted them. "Officer Morgan," he greeted her, stopping at a respectful distance. "I was hoping I might find you here today." "Do I know you?" Eliza asked cautiously, one hand resting on Riggs's collar, more from habit than necessity. "Not directly," the man replied, "but we have a mutual acquaintance." He knelt slowly, allowing Riggs to approach and sniff his extended hand. "Hello again, old friend." Understanding dawned as Eliza watched the interaction. "You were the little boy in the storm drain," she said quietly. "The one Riggs found on our first successful track together." The man nodded, standing again with visible emotion. 23 years ago, I was 8 years old, terrified, convinced no one would ever find me. And then there was this dog, somehow appearing out of nowhere, staying with me until help arrived. Eliza remembered that day vividly, how everyone had said the trail was too cold, how Riggs had proved them all wrong. Following a scent through 3 miles of suburban Atlanta to find a missing child. It had been the moment she first truly understood the extraordinary capabilities of her partner. I recognized you from the news coverage after the Volkov incident, the man continued. I've been meaning to find you, to say thank you properly. I'm starting at the police academy next month, K-9 division, if they'll have me. Because of Rig, Eliza said, echoing Emily's words from earlier. Because of both of you, he corrected gently. You showed me that day that there are people and dogs who will never stop looking, never stop trying, even when everyone else has given up. As they talked, Eliza learned that he had followed their career from afar, watching as they transformed from a local K-9 unit to international instructors. His decision to join law enforcement had been directly inspired by their example, a path that had finally brought him full circle to this meeting. By the time they parted ways, exchanging contact information with promises to meet at the academy, Eliza felt a profound sense of continuity, of lives intersecting across time, of purpose extending beyond any single mission or moment. Walking to their vehicle with Riggs beside her, she thought about the strange, beautiful web of connection that had formed around their partnership. The little girl who now trained with service dogs, the boy from the storm drain now becoming an officer himself, the countless handlers worldwide who carried their methodologies into new challenges and contexts. You know what amazes me, partner, she said as they reached the car. It's not just what we stopped, though that matters enormously. It's what we started, all these ripples moving outward, touching lives we'll never even know about. Riggs looked up at her with those wise amber eyes, and in them she saw the same truth that had guided them from the beginning, that the greatest impact often came not from grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but from the simple, unwavering commitment to doing what was right, one step at a time, one life at a time. As they drove away from the airport where their greatest challenge had begun, Eliza felt the weight of their shared journey, the triumphs and the losses, the moments of danger and the quiet victories. But more than that, she felt the promise of what still lay ahead. New handlers to train, new partnerships to foster, new lives to touch through the extraordinary bond they had forged together. And in that promise lay the truest measure of their success. Not just what they had prevented, but what they had made possible. The training field at the Global K-9 Detection Center hummed with activity as handler teams from 12 countries worked through advanced detection scenarios. From her position at the observation platform, Eliza watched with professional pride as each team navigated the challenges with increasing confidence and precision. Beside her, Riggs sat in dignified retirement, his muzzle now graying, but his eyes still sharp as he observed the younger dogs at work. At 12 years old, he had officially stepped back from active training duties, though he still accompanied Eliza everywhere as a living embodiment of the methodologies they taught. They're getting it, Director Bishop commented, joining them at the railing. That team from Singapore, 3 months ago, they were struggling with basic alert protocols. Now look at them. Eliza nodded, watching as the handler and her young German shepherd worked through a complex scenario involving multiple hidden threats. The communication between them was nearly seamless, each reading the other's subtle cues with growing fluency. It's the trust, she replied. Once they truly believe in each other, everything else follows. Bishop smiled, reaching down to scratch Riggs behind the ears, a liberty the dignified K-9 officer permitted from very few people. The Riggs principle, as we've come to call it around here, the training session concluded and handlers gathered with their K-9 partners for debriefing. Eliza made her way down to the field, Riggs moving more slowly beside her, but still maintaining his characteristic alertness. As she addressed the group, highlighting strengths and suggesting refinements, she noticed a young woman at the back of the gathering, perhaps in her early 20s, watching the proceedings with intense focus, though she had no K-9 partner beside her. After the teams dispersed to their next assignments, the young woman approached hesitantly. "Officer Morgan, I'm Cadet Emily Winters. We met at the airport," Eliza finished, recognition dawning. "The little girl who wanted to pet Riggs. But you're all grown up now." Emily nodded, smiling down at Riggs, who studied her with thoughtful recognition. "I'm in my second year at the academy, K-9 division, like I always planned." "That's wonderful," Eliza replied warmly. "How are your parents?" "They're great. Dad's business is doing well, and Mom volunteers at the center's community outreach program. They never forgot what happened that day. What could have happened?" They walked together toward the main building, Emily explaining her current training and aspirations. She had excelled in the Academy's preliminary K-9 handling courses and had been recommended for specialized detection training, the very program Eliza had developed based on her experiences with Riggs. "The thing is," Emily said, her voice taking on a more serious tone, "I've been assigned a partner, but we're having some challenges. He's brilliant, incredibly capable, but headstrong. My instructors say we're mismatched, that I should request reassignment to a more suitable dog." Eliza smiled, memories of her early days with Riggs washing over her. "Let me guess. Belgian Malinois? Too much energy, too much attitude?" Emily's eyes widened in surprise. "How did you know?" "Because I've heard those exact words before," Eliza replied, glancing down at Riggs. "Some partnerships don't look promising on paper, but sometimes those are the ones that accomplish the extraordinary." They reached the kennels where the Academy's K-9s in training were housed. In the last run, a young Malinois paced with barely contained energy, his intelligent eyes tracking their approach with intense focus. "That's Atlas," Emily said, a mixture of frustration and affection in her voice. "Brilliant but impossible, according to my instructors." Eliza observed the young dog, recognizing in his posture and alertness echoes of a younger Riggs. There was something in his eyes too, a keen intelligence coupled with an independent spirit that conventional training methods often struggle to channel. "May I?" she asked, approaching the kennel gate. At Emily's nod, Eliza opened the gate and entered the run, Riggs following at a measured pace. The young Malinois immediately approached, not with aggression, but with curious assessment, his attention divided between Eliza and the older dog accompanying her. What followed was a silent communication between the two K-9s, Riggs projecting calm authority, Atlas responding with gradually decreasing energy until both dogs stood in a state of mutual respect. "He's not impossible," Eliza said, observing the interaction. "He's exceptional, and he needs a handler who understands that his independence isn't a flaw. It's potentially his greatest strength." Over the following weeks, Eliza worked with Emily and Atlas, sharing techniques she had developed with Riggs that conventional training manuals didn't cover. She taught Emily to read the subtle communications in Atlas's body language, to trust his instincts even when they seemed to contradict established protocols. More importantly, she helped Emily understand that true partnership wasn't about control, but about mutual trust, each respecting the unique capabilities the other brought to their shared mission. The transformation was remarkable. Where once they had struggled with basic coordination, Emily and Atlas began to move as a unified team, their communication becoming more fluid and intuitive with each training session. "You've given them something special," Bishop observed, watching from the sidelines as Emily and Atlas navigated an advanced detection scenario with growing confidence. "Something that can't be taught from a manual?" Eliza nodded, feeling Riggs press against her leg in their familiar gesture of silent communication. "We're just passing along what we learned together. That the strongest partnerships aren't built on command and obedience, but on mutual respect and trust." On the final day of the specialized training program, the graduating teams demonstrated their capabilities before an audience of law enforcement officials and government representatives. Emily and Atlas, once considered mismatched, now performed with such synchronized precision that they drew spontaneous applause from the assembled dignitaries. Later, as the formal ceremonies concluded and teams prepared to return to their respective agencies, Emily sought out Eliza and Riggs one last time. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. kneeling to address both Eliza and Riggs at eye level. Everyone said we were wrong for each other, that I needed a beginner-friendly dog. If I had listened, you would have missed discovering what you're truly capable of together, Eliza finished. Some partnerships are easy from the start. Others require more work, more patience. But those are often the ones that achieve the extraordinary. Atlas sat beside Emily with newfound composure, his energy channeled into alert awareness rather than restless motion. Riggs regarded the younger dog with what Eliza could only describe as approval, one exceptional canine officer recognizing another. "We've been assigned to the Atlanta field office," Emily said, her voice bright with anticipation. "So we'll be close by. Maybe we could visit sometimes? Learn more from the legends?" Eliza laughed, touched by the sentiment but uncomfortable with the characterization. "We're not legends. We're just partners who figured some things out together. And yes, our door's always open to you both." As they watched Emily and Atlas join their fellow graduates, Eliza felt a profound sense of completion. The methodologies she and Riggs had pioneered were now being carried forward by a new generation of handlers and canines, each adding their own insights and experiences to the evolving discipline. "You know what this means, don't you, partner?" she said softly to Riggs as they walked back toward their office. "Our work will continue long after we're gone. Through Emily and Atlas, through all the teams we've trained, the torch is being passed." Riggs looked up at her with those wise amber eyes, now slightly clouded with age, but still reflecting the same unwavering trust that had defined their partnership from the beginning. In his gaze, she read his complete agreement and something more, a contentment with the legacy they had built together. That evening, as sunset painted the training fields in gold and crimson, Eliza sat on the center's observation deck, Riggs resting beside her chair. Below, a few determined handlers continued working with their canine partners, refining techniques as darkness approached. Among them were Emily and Atlas, their silhouettes moving in perfect harmony against the fading light. Watching them, Eliza saw echoes of her own journey with Riggs, the challenges overcome, the trust established, the extraordinary bond that transcended conventional understanding. "We did good, partner," she whispered, reaching down to stroke Riggs's head. "Really good." And in the peaceful silence of the gathering dusk, surrounded by the living embodiment of their shared legacy, Eliza Morgan and her extraordinary canine partner found the rarest and most precious reward of all, the knowledge that what they had begun together would continue to grow and flourish long after their own journey was complete. In that continuity lay the true measure of their success, not just in the lives they had saved or the threats they had neutralized, but in the partnerships they had inspired and the future they had helped to secure, one handler and one canine at a time. And in that knowledge there was peace,